Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Transparency and Ethics. We have our last batch of agency budgets today. We have 4, so we have a little more time in between, but still have to deliberate. So our 2 people from Ways and Means who sat on here with us can report out to us as when they meet. So, and we do have a quorum, and we see Senator Thompson online. So good morning.
Morning.
We were just saying we'd like to be where you are with your background.
It's all just for ambience.
Well, our first hearing we have is Board of Technical Professions, and we have Elena Rudger from Research to give us the budget run through. Good morning, Elena. We're going to unmute you, Elena. We can see you talking, but can't hear you.
Can you hear me
Can
now?
you try again, Elena?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry, I'm in the conference room and the systems aren't connecting, so I don't know which one needs to be muted or unmuted.
So far, you're good, Elena, so you go ahead.
Okay. All right, so the Board of Technical Professions is where I'll begin. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So the Board of Technical Professions, their mission is to establish and maintain a high standard of integrity, skills, and practice in the technical professions, and to safeguard the life, health, and property and welfare of the public. There are 5 professions that fall within the board's purview, and those are, you can find them in volume 3 on page 1856, which is the second page of the budget analysis for this agency. And the 5 professions are engineers, surveyors, architects, geologists, and landscape architects. Also, I'd like to mention that the executive director, Larry Carnes, is available on WebEx to provide some testimony and answer questions when I'm finished. So jumping into the bulk of the BA, we're going to move to page 1863 and start with fiscal year 2021. For fiscal year 2021, the agency requests a revised estimate of $780,918, all from the Board of Technical Professions Fee Fund. This is the same amount that was approved by the 2020 legislature, and it includes funding for 5 FTE positions, which is also the same as the number approved by the 2020 legislature. I'd just like to highlight that it is the same amount, but there is a $999 swap between salaries and wages and contractual services in fiscal year 2021. The overall amount remains the same. There's just that swap within the categories of expenditure. On the following page, 1864, you'll see that the governor concurs with the agency's fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. On the next page starts fiscal year 2022. On page 1865, you'll see that the agency requests fiscal year 2022 operating expenditures of $786,172, all from the Board of Technical Professions Fee Fund. This is an increase of $5,254 or 0.7% above the agency's fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. And the increase is primarily attributable to expenditures for salaries and wages and contractual services. This amount includes funding for 5 FTE positions, which is the same as fiscal year 2021. On the following page, 1866, the governor concurs with the agency's fiscal year 2022 request. Fiscal year 2023 begins on page 1867. And in fiscal year 2023, the agency requests operating expenditures of $792,091. And this is all from the Board of Technical Professions Fee Fund. You'll see written in the budget analysis that it says all from special revenue funds. And I just had an oversight when I typed this up. It is still the Board of Technical Professions Fee Fund only where the funding is coming from. This is an increase of $5,919 or 0.8% above the agency's fiscal year 2022 request. And the increase in expenditures is primarily attributable to salaries and wages and contractual services. And again, this includes funding for 5 FTE positions, which is no change from the previous fiscal years. On the next page, 1,868, the governor concurs with the agency's fiscal year 2023 request. And that's all I have for the budget for this agency, and I will stand for questions when appropriate.
Elena. Also, we have testimony in our packet from Larry Carnes, the executive director, and we see him on WebEx also. So if the committee has any questions for either one, and Larry, do you have any comments you'd like to say? We do have your written words, but you're welcome to speak with us.
I really don't have much to add. We're a small agency. We actually only have 4 full-time employees currently. We have 1 open FTE, and we actually had quite a bit of savings this year. Our actual expenditures were about $650,000, even though we were authorized for $780,000. A lot of that is we've been remote meetings. We haven't gone to any conferences, results and lower salaries and 1 open FTE position. So we've been operating well within that budget. Things are going well at the Board of Technical Professions. There are bills pending in the legislature which would increase our workload. We'll have to see what happens to those.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for joining us this morning. Committee, are there any questions for Elena or Larry? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with the expenditures less, about $130,000 less than budgeted, did the budget get adjusted going forward at all? Maybe that's a question for Elena or for Mr. Carnes. Or is it kind of the same request as, I see the request went up?
It is, the small increases are just due to expected increases in cost of benefits and that sort of thing. And when the coronavirus pandemic ends, we'll probably return to attending national conferences. We licensed 5 separate professions: geology, architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, and land surveyors. They all have national organizations that help us develop the examination and testing procedures for professions. And I think this year was an anomaly that we were able to operate on such a low budget.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering why then it's being increased even further. I guess for fiscal year 2023 is $12,000 more than the budget for this last year, and considering there was a lot of savings, it looked like, in what was expended and what the budget was, I just find it kind of curious that we're still increasing it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps our analyst could answer that question, but my assumption is we're setting a budget. And so they may have carryover funds that would be seen in their ending balance, but we would still need to set a budget that would accommodate all the expenses for the coming year. Would that be correct?
Elena, are you able to answer that, or Larry?
I think I can answer that. The budget request is to continue and maintain the agency's operations. And most of the adjustments are just for adjustments made in the Division of Budget's budget cost indices, which the agency uses to estimate their expenditures. So when you look at fiscal year 2023 on page 1,867 and 1,868, within those categories of expenditures, there's breakdown into what kinds of increases they're expecting in those years. So for example, in fiscal year 2023, contractual services, they're estimating an increase of $4,000 for their contractual services, which is primarily for adjustments to the rates for building security, work orders and maintenance, the Kansas register fees, and the monumental building surcharge, which is it's like a rental rate that applies to buildings and agencies located within Shawnee County, and it's a rate per square foot, and that's increasing in fiscal year 2023 from $2.90 to $3 per square foot. So those are just kind of those are some of the adjustments that account for the increase over the fiscal years.
Senator Francisco.
Madam Chair. So maybe I didn't say that very, very well. I'm not concerned about the increase over the past year. I was just saying the budget wouldn't go down if expenditures the previous year were lower, because they would, my understanding is they still would need the budget for the coming year. So we're budgeting what they plan to spend, and it will not reflect savings from the current year. The ending balance would reflect those savings, but the budget would need to be to accommodate all their projected expenses.
Senator McGinn.
So just to be clear, your revenue, your fees that you use are just from your license fees. Is that right, Larry?
Yes, we
You don't
have
have-
the,
you don't,
we don't get any money from the general fund. In fact, we contributed money to the general state fund.
right. I remember those years. Hope we don't do it again. And then does your, the people that you license, does that fluctuate very much from year to year?
To some degree, we have about 30,000 licensees. About 2/3 of those are non-resident licensees that are licensed by reciprocity that live outside the state of Kansas, and about 1/3 of them are Kansas residents. Depends what economic development's going on. People in other states, engineers and architects, if there's work here, they come in and they get a license so they can perform that work. Kind of depends on what's going on in the state.
Thanks, Larry.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
That also helps clear up in my mind too, just to remind myself, there's no state general funds and this is their fee revenue that looks pretty stable if we look on page 1871 too, through the years here too. So that helps me understand a lot also. Are there any other questions, committee? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Madam Vice Chair for clearing that up, and you as well, Mr. Carnes, that this is a fee-generated funding for the agency, and there's nothing from the state general fund. So that helps clear it up for me. Thank you.
I appreciate our vice chair serving as a budget chair in the past, that's been a question in my mind as we have gone through these too, I have to bring it back to where we are with the fees that they charge themselves. And that does help me an awful lot too. So if there are no other questions, would I have a motion to pass out the governor's recommendation favorably for the Board of Technical Professions? Senator Francisco.
I so move.
And a second by Senator McGinn, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, motion passes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us, Larry. Elena, you're up next also. You have Abstractors Board of Examiners. You're the researcher. And then we also have joining us on WebEx Sean Herrick, Executive Secretary, Kansas Abstractor Board of Examiners. So welcome also, Sean. And Elena, you go ahead and run through the budget with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The Abstractors Board of Examiners is in volume 3 on page 1509. As the chair mentioned, the executive secretary, Sean Herrick, is available via WebEx, and she'll be able to provide some testimony and answer questions as well. To start off with, I would like to answer a question that you may have. What is an abstractor? An abstractor is a person who prepares abstracts of title, and they provide summaries giving details of title deeds and documents that prove an owner's right to dispose of land, together with any encumbrances that relate to the property. So an abstractor helps you make sure that you have good title to the land and that you can do with it what you please without running into any problems. The Abstractors Board of Examiners licenses and regulates companies and their employees that sell abstracts of land titles to Kansas real estate. And the board strives to ensure practicing abstractors are professional, so the public may rely on their work products. The budget within the fiscal year 2021 budget begins on page 1516. Now, I'd just like to note that this is also a fee-funded agency, so no state general fund money is received by this agency. They do remit 10% of their fees collected to the state general fund, up to $100,000. On page 1516, the agency requests a revised estimate for fiscal year 2021 totaling $25,703, all from the abstractors fee fund. This is the same amount approved by the 2020 legislature, and the revised estimate does not include any FTE positions. And that, I just would like to note here that there are 0 FTEs, but the executive secretary is employed by the agency. It does not count as an FTE position because the executive secretary doesn't work enough hours to meet the threshold to hit 1 FTE position. It's a part-time, unclassified, temporary position, and she does not receive KPERS benefits. And the governor concurs with the agency's fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. On the following page, 1517, you'll see that the agency requests operating expenditures of $25,716, all from the abstractors fee fund. This is an increase of $13 or 0.1% above their 2021 revised estimate. And the increase is primarily due to expenditures for salary and wages fringe benefits. Although the executive secretary doesn't receive KPERS and does not count as a full FTE position, she does receive some fringe benefits. And that's what the increase is, and it's accounted for in the division of the budget's budget cost indices. That's what the increase is for. The governor concurred with the agency's fiscal year 2022 request. And on the following page is fiscal year 2023. It's on page 1518, and the agency requests fiscal year 2023 operating expenditures of $25,717, all from the abstractors fee fund. And this is an increase of $1 or less than 0.1% above the 2022 request. And the increase, again, is due to expenditures for salary and wages fringe benefits, which are adjusted via the budget cost indices provided by the division of the budget. And the governor concurs with the agency's fiscal year 2023 request. And on page 1521, you'll see the fees listed, and there's only a handful of fees there, and all of the agency's funding comes from those fees. And with that, I will stand for questions when appropriate, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Elena. We also have in our packet written testimony from Sean Herrick, who is joining us on WebEx. Sean, and we see that you're pretty brand new there, but it looks like you're doing a good job. What we'd say a one-man show, and we've heard some others also. Would you like to say a few words to us, Sean?
Thank you, Senator Bowers and committee. I was told you got on tight schedule, so I highlighted my little testimony here so I can try to make it extremely brief. I took over the position from Glenn McQueen and Patricia Zellner, who were 30-year veterans for the Abstractors Board and both in their 80s. They decided that it was time to retire, so I took it on for them in the state. I also work for the Kansas Land Title Association, and many, probably close to 100% of the members of the abstractors community are also members of the Kansas Land Title Association. So that's how I got convinced I should take on the Kansas Abstractors Board. I can report that the second time through, things have gone much more smoothly. We are nearly through with the renewals for 2021 for all the abstractors license. You'll see in my testimony how many we had last year. To date, we are at 186 of the 192 that renewed their employee licenses last year. And the operative licenses, which is code for the business's license, of the 174, 163 have renewed to date. And the ones that haven't renewed, most of them, there are a few that have retired or passed away in the last year, but most of it is their insurance. They wait for proof of insurance before they send in their renewal. Our agency is supported by the fee fund exclusively, and I am really the only expense is my time, and I'm half-time or a little less than half-time. We did not use any pandemic funding. I was asked to speak to that. This last fall, we did have 2 exams. Both people that sat for the exam passed the part of the test that they needed to. If they take, there's 4 parts of the test. If they fail any part or pass the parts that they pass, they do not have to take again, so they can take them as they pass them, which helps a lot. It is a very difficult test. The current members of the board: Roger Hannaford III from Marion, Kansas, Jill Renard from Manhattan, Kansas, and Geraldine Stoll in left my brain, La Crosse, Kansas, are very knowledgeable, longtime abstractors and title agents in the state and help me a lot. And with that, I will stand for any questions or whatever.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. You did a very nice job in a very short amount of time, just a nice synopsis. And Senator Francisco has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question, just a comment. And actually a thank you, Sean, for taking over this work. I recognize that a lot more transactions are being done through title insurance, but when an abstractor is needed for that land transfer. So you're helping us maintain that profession in Kansas. So thank you.
If the chair will allow, I would love to reply to that comment. I know that, is that all right?
Oh, yes, Sean, go right ahead.
A lot of people don't know what abstractors do and feel like they're a dinosaur in the industry, and especially in the western part of the state, they're still extremely needed. It's a knowledge base that I'm afraid is dwindling, and we need those guys out there that know how to make sure that these titles and abstracts are researched properly and still part of the world. So there's not very many of those kids that want to work that hard and get into the industry. So thank you for your comments, Senator.
Senator Warren had a question, and then we'll go to Senator McGinn. So Senator
Thank you,
Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Francisco, and you as well, Ms. Herrick. It is a very vital service and expertise that is very much needed for our private property owners across the state of Kansas. So we're glad to see that you're still having exams and licensing folks, and it's vital when you're looking at title disputes and things like that, that we get it right as a state. So glad you're there and doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Senator McGinn.
Thanks for Elena. We put down 0.5 for an FTE, and looks like this just reflects 0 all the way through. I see the little sub note, but doesn't really make sense to me. Why don't we just put a 0.5?
From what I understand, it's a rounding, it's a rounding, technicality. So if it doesn't hit the 0.5 threshold, then it rounds down to 0.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, if the committee is comfortable with this budget, do I have a motion to accept the governor's recommendation on the abstractors Board of Examiners? Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I so move.
And a second, Senator Warren? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. All right, so we're moving to our last two and right on time. With joining us on the last two is our researcher, Matt Moore. And we had the State Bank Commissioner before us, and we'll have speaking in person, Barb Albright, Director of Finance and Administration Office of the State, and we'll have her chat with us after Matthew does his synopsis. And then actually, we also have for questions, if he'd like to comment, David Herandon, Bank Commissioner, Office of the State Bank Commissioner. So Matthew, are you with us?
Yeah, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Good morning. And my name is Matthew Moore. I'm with Kansas Legislative Research. Before you should be a copy of my budget analysis for the Office of the State Bank Commissioner. It's a landscape page, about 30 pages long. It is a biennial agency, so we'll be reviewing 3 years today. The first few pages are just an overview of the agency. The Office of the State Bank Commissioner is the regulatory agency for state chartered banks. They perform most examinations, some education for consumer lending organizations. There's a few kind of overview of some history over the last several years on page 2 and 3. And then some performance measures on page 6. One thing I would like to highlight, there is a measure for the number of state chartered banks as well as the assets of state chartered banks. And one thing I'd like to highlight is generally you can see a downward trend of the number of banks, however, a increase in the assets for those banks. And speaking with the agency, my understanding is that while there are maybe fewer banks, those are due to mergers and acquisitions, banks kind of combining into one another, creating larger entities that they then have to oversee. So while there is kind of a downward trend in the number, those fewer banks are then becoming larger and larger for the agency then to have to review. On page 7, you can kind of see a budget trend over the last 10 years. Generally, it's stayed more or less flat. You can see it's an all fee-funded agency, no SGF. Pages 8 and 9 kind of provide a overview of the operating budget by program, major category of expenditures, as well as the funding source. But I'll begin in earnest on page 1549 with FY 2021. The agency had requested a revised estimate of $11.2 million, all from special revenue funds. This is a decrease of about $740,000, primarily due to COVID-related expenditure decreases. So, as I said earlier, the Office of the State Bank Commissioner examines banks. Prior to the pandemic, that involved people going to banks, being inside, working with the employees there at the banks. Due to the pandemic and social distancing concerns, that's not really possible any longer. So a majority of that work is done virtually. So the agency saw a decrease in those contractual services for travel-related expenditures. So meals and lodgings, gasoline, vehicle upkeep, all sorts of these expenditures related to traveling to do this work kind of saw a dramatic decrease. Generally, there is a increase in the agency for its supplemental requests, which you can see on 1550 there at the bottom, and then some narrative detail on 1551. So the agency had requested to increase its board member per diem compensation from currently $35 per meeting to $150. This was a request they made last year as well. Generally, board member compensation is set by statute, and I believe the statute was enacted in the mid-70s and hasn't been changed since. They've indicated some issues in retaining board member or finding board members to sit on the board due to that low compensation, and so they sought to increase it. The governor did not recommend that supplemental request. As you can see on 1550, her recommendation is $11.2 million. The only difference is her not recommending that supplemental request. And unless there are questions, I can move on to FY22.
To keep going, Matthew.
Okay. FY22 begins on 1552. The agency requested $11.7 million, all from special revenue funds. This is an increase of about $530,000. The reason for that increase is due to two things. The first being kind of a resumption of some of that in-person activity. So after the pandemic's presumably done, they'll do some level of in-person investigation and examinations of banks. So there's a slight increase due to that. The second thing is due to salary increases. So the bank commissioner, they do annual performance reviews, I believe in the fall and in the winter, and then they kind of award merit-based pay increases at the beginning of the year. And so they've budgeted about $300,000 for that kind of a pot of merit-based pay increases. So that's the other reason for that increase over FY 2021. My understanding is that Senate Ways and Means has made a global motion to remove all salary increases included in the governor's recommendation. So this sort of snuck in is the right word, but it is in the governor's recommendation, and so that has been pulled out. So while it does appear in the budget analysis under her recommendation, when you see your subcommittee reports, that will be an action of it being removed. Other than that, there aren't any real increases. The agency anticipates continued level of spending. You'll see on 1554, they again, requested the per diem increase. However, that was denied from by the governor, and that's the only difference between what they requested and what the governor recommended. Unless there are any questions, I can move on to 2023.
Why don't you keep going, Matthew? We'll
Okay.
wrap it all up all at once and have questions for you afterwards.
Certainly. So on 1555, you'll see FY23. And the agency requests $12 million. That's an increase of $230,000. Again, very similar with FY 2021. There's a small bit of increase due to kind of a continued resumption of in-person activities, and then another increase for an additional salary increase, this time roughly about $194,000, which, as I indicated before, will be pulled out due to Senate Ways and Means global motion. Other than that, a continued level of spending. You'll see on 1556, the governor recommends $11.9 million. Again, the very same thing with the previous years. They requested board member compensation increase, and the governor's removed that from their recommendation and her recommendation. The last thing I'd like to touch upon would just be their fee fund. If you'll turn to 1559, you'll see kind of a narrative of the bank commissioner's fee fund. And then on 1560, you'll see the actual chart of their revenue and their expenditures and ending balances. You'll see generally kind of a downward trend, and in 2023, you'll see kind of some lower ending balances. In speaking with the agency, my understanding is it's partly due to when they receive their fees. So they how their fee structure works is they receive an assessment on the based off of the assets of the bank. So they'll assess what their fee is, and they'll collect it about 3 times a year. The first half they receive in July. The next quarter they receive, I believe, in January, and then in May they'll receive that final quarter of their fees. So when you look at their ending balances, keep in mind this is in June, and then the next month is when they'll receive their first kind of pot of fee collection. And then if you'll see on the bottom of 1560, there's the assessment rates for banks. It continues on to 1561 with trusts, and then some consumer and mortgage lending division licensure fees. The remainder of the budget analysis is just broken up by program. Unless you'd like me to go into that level of detail, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Very well done. It's a lot of information there. Maybe do we have questions for Matthew? Yes, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The agency was addressing the concern about the money paid to the board members. So right now it's $35 per day for attendance, and that's per diem. Do they also receive any expenses, or do you know?
Yes, so generally they'll receive mileage, subsistence allowance, and actual expenses. This was just to increase that per diem rate.
Thank you.
All right, well, Senator McGinn.
Aren't they also professionals that are probably already getting a salary from their work?
Matthew, would you like to answer that, or shall we save that for Barb?
I would, I think I would have to refer that to the agency. That would be more of a policy question.
Well, are you ready to join us, Barb? So we have Barb Albright, Director of Finance and Administration, Office of the State Bank Commissioner. Good morning, and you pushed your button? Perfect, and we've we've learned we have to speak into our mic so folks on WebEx can hear it. So welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Chairwoman Bowers and members of the committee. My name is Barb Albright, and I am the Director of Finance and Administration for the Bank Commissioner's Office. Also in attendance virtually today is Bank Commissioner David Herndon. So I didn't have a lot of prepared remarks, knowing Matthew would do such a fantastic job explaining our agency, and so, which I very much appreciate, makes my job easier. But I can address Senator McGinn's question first, if you'd like. And you are correct. They are professionals. It has been difficult in that, you know, we have 9 board members. We have party rules we have to follow. We also have districts we have to make sure that are there, separations that are required. We also, you have to have some that are like not in the banking industry. So I'm not sure, I can't remember the term for those, but so that has become a little bit of the challenge, I think, is to get people to commit, if you will, to those monthly meetings.
Right. Do you have anything else, or shall we just have the committee ask you questions?
You can go ahead and go with
Right.
questions.
Do we have questions for Barb? Oh, yes, go ahead, Senator McGinn.
You would be interested in going to $88.66 a day, and that would remind them what the legislature gets paid.
We sure can do that. So, yeah. No, the only other thing I guess I would add is I feel like our agency through COVID, we did go 100% virtual. Our offices are open now, but no one is required to come back until vaccines and everything, you know. And we've been successful and been able to operate. We probably had an easier transition because our examiners are in banks or our consumer mortgage lending. They were on the road. So a lot of them were used to working outside of the office anyway. And as part of that, we are looking at potential downsizing office space and allowing examiners to stay 100% virtual. That's just one of the options we're looking at.
Yes, Senator McGinn.
Where are you guys located, and are your examiners all out of one place, or are they?
We're across the state. So we used to have 7 field offices, or 7 offices, if you will. We now have 5. We closed the Erie office in Dodge City about 1.5 years ago, but the examiners are still there. So we feel it's very important to have examiners in the industry, the areas, you know, especially Western Kansas, farming community. So we need them knowledgeable. So they work from home. We have Topeka, Lenexa, Wichita, Hayes, and Salina currently are the 5 that we have, and that we are entertaining and looking at possible downsizing on some of those. A lot of those, we will not do 100% away with any offices because of meetings. We have banks come in or, you know, other things like that.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to second Senator McGinn's motion to allow up to a maximum of $88.60 for the board. But, you know, I know, and, you know, I feel I'm so lucky to serve close to the Capitol, but I recognize that even if you pay somebody mileage, if they have to drive a long distance, you're not paying them for that time. And it is a lot to ask people out of their schedule. So I'd like to at least go up to $88.60, and I would also, if the rest of the committee agrees, go up to the request made by the agency.
Shall we hear, David, would you like to make any comments to us while you're on WebEx?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's my pleasure to attend WebEx. I have to kid Senator Thompson for his backdrop. Both of us live in Shawnee, and I presume he is in Shawnee. I, however, am on the beach at Dolphin Island, Alabama. Regrettably, it's raining and it's cold. Not as cold as Kansas, but anyway. So thank you for allowing me to attend virtually. A couple of points that I would like to make regarding the director. regarding the directors. When I joined the agency about 18 months ago, as Barb said, the board consists of 9 members. 6 of those members' terms had expired, but under statute, they continue serving until their replacement is appointed and confirmed. So I went on a recruiting mission and have successfully, in the last 18 months, found people willing to serve. They primarily have been bankers, but 2 have been, by statute, 3 of the 9 must represent the private sector, the public sector. And we have been successful in finding 2 people to serve at that, and we are recruiting actively the 3rd, whose term, to replace the director whose term has expired. One of the issues that comes up, and we've been able to counter it with the ability to meet remotely, is that we've been not asking them to spend the time driving, and in some cases, an overnight trip in Topeka. We have been meeting virtually, but it is professionally embarrassing to ask somebody to commit a time, even though it may just be a half a day a month, but it's professionally embarrassing to tell them that their compensation is $35 and ask them for that commitment. That's why we introduced last year, requested the bill. It was picked up, but due to the short session last year, it stayed without any action taken, and the senator that introduced it did not survive the re-election, so it's out there. We'd like to pick it up again. Totally respect the issues and that sort of thing. It's just, like I said, a challenge to find, especially people who know a little bit about banking but are not bankers, to represent the public sector. So with that, I would respectfully request any support that we could get. Second point regarding the locations, the field offices that we work in and that sort of thing. We are working hard and have been in particular working for the Lenexa field office and the Wichita field office to reduce the square footage space. That would allow us to save some additional money, obviously, to reduce space, but also to continue to allow a job perk for those people that work there to work remotely. We compete with other regulators, primarily federal regulators, whose pay scale is significantly higher than the states. So we're regrettably oftentimes turned into a training ground or the farm club for the other regulators. We train them, then lose them because of the economic impact. Day before yesterday, we lost a very valued, very capable examiner, went to the private sector, doing exactly the same thing that he's doing for the state, but he's going to be making 65% more annually than we're able to pay him. So I get that competing with the private sector is out of bounds, but I'm just trying to compete with the public sector. That's why we left the salary requests in there, I'd rather have it budgeted and approved and not spend it than have it not approved and have the opportunity or the need to spend it. So I respectfully recognize the Ways and Means Committees and the others, that sort of thing, but wanted to give you a little bit of insight as to my background as to why it's there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
David, and we are lucky to have 2 members of Ways and Means on our committee too, so who have the background. And Senator McGinn has a question.
You referred to a bill last year. Do you have to have a bill to change this fee increase?
Yes.
Yes, we understand. I'm sorry, Barb, go ahead.
My understanding is because it's in statute, the only way is through a bill. And so I believe it was Bill 178 or 478, I have that number, that Senator Braun had initiated. And then because of COVID, it just didn't go anywhere.
I know, so that bill is dead and gone. Where's the other bill?
No one is, Senator Braun's gone. We did not actively look for someone to to introduce a new bill.
If we don't do another bill and we say, oh, we'll give you 150, you're not going to get 150 unless you have the bill.
My understanding is you can do a budget proviso, but I would have to defer to Matthew or some,
Do a budget proviso, it's only good for 1 year. The future.
correct. And we do understand that.
Okay, well, if you're going to go that route, then my suggestion would be $100. See how it goes, see how you're, getting your members, if that improves and that kind of thing. I don't know all your folks, but it just seems to me like, do a lot of negotiating and I always ask for way more than I expect to get. So I would be interested in the $100 for 1 year proviso, but I think you all need to follow up if you're serious about this and get a bill drafted.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
if you want to get a bill drafted, we'll introduce it in Ways and Means, and then the bill will be alive for 2 years.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm just saying, if you're serious about it, because I hate provisos
Okay.
in a budget. Okay, so we try to limit those, or otherwise everybody just provisos the whole thing up, and it's only a 1 year deal.
And then they probably just want to continue past that usually.
No, so provisos are generally reserved for, we can't fix something, so we're going to fix it 1 year in this budget because somebody's going to draft legislation or we're going to have more information next time. I wouldn't go down to a 1 year proviso path because if you don't start working on that bill, what's going to happen? You're going to give them their $100. And then next year, you're going to come back and say, oh, by the way, it's still 35 now.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Would you have a motion to add that
I don't
into
know if
the
anybody
notes?
else has comments, but I would suggest that we put it to $100 for this year in the event you do a proviso and you need to get a bill drafted, and then come back next year and tell us, is the $100 working?
Okay.
Senator Schwab.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you think it's just the compensation that's deterring people from wanting to serve on this? Or are they also required to provide background checks or any other personal information that might be deterring people from applying for these positions?
May I speak to that since I was the one that was recruiting the board members?
Yes, please.
Yes, every candidate is subject to a pretty significant background check that takes a lot of time. It is a complete and thorough background check conducted by the KBI. And the appointments are then for 3 years. You can have 2 consecutive terms, but after that, when your term ends, you continue to serve until your replacement has been identified, gone through the background check, appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So it is a long process, and it could be a 6+ year commitment.
Senator Schwab.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It sounds that may be the major deterrent, is that they're having to provide all of that information, make such a long commitment, and only being paid $35 a day. I also don't know many people that would sign up for that. So I completely understand your concern. I think people are willing to volunteer for things when they don't have to sacrifice personal information and be subject to that type of scrutiny. But when you are subjecting people to that kind of background check, you really have to compensate them for their effort. Yeah, thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where would the increase in compensation come from? Would that be from increased fees to members, or where would that be paid from?
So it would just come out of our budget, which is all fee funded. And you know, we reassess fees annually, so we just monitor that.
So no SGF funds that. we're
No,
looking
ma'am.
at. So thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could just remind me of the bill number.
Okay, can I get that back to you? I don't want to quote, unless Matthew has it in front of him.
I do, Madam Chair.
Just- Oh, okay.
It was Senate Bill 458.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I could just clarify Senator McGinn's motion, would you like to add the funding for, re-add the funding for the bank, the fee, the per diem rates? If it was going to be up to 100, it would add about approximately 7,000.
I was going to make that in my motion. Just before I make that motion, if I may. So everybody understands this 2.5% that we're pulling out of the budget. We do that well, for years, for 10 years, people that work for the state got 0 raise. So when we tried to start putting raises in, agencies kept putting them in every individual budget. And so based on not knowing what our ending balances were going to be, we always take those all out. And then at omnibus, maybe we put in 2%, 3%, whatever. So we put it in and then we negotiate that with the House. So it's put in at the end because we're looking at what is it that we can afford and we have a better idea what our budget's going to look like. So it's just out, and we call it a global removal because it's going to be a global entity that we're going to put back in at the end. So we're doing it to everybody.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question about that? Just
Oh,
for
yes.
my own.
Yes,
So
go
I've
ahead.
only been with the agency about 3 years, 3.5. And my understanding was there was a movement, if you will, to go to more of a performance-based structure. And so that was something that was worked on with budget, Department of Administration, and obviously the governor's office had to approve it. So because it was kind of moved that way and it was part of going from classified to unclassified, I think there's some confusion, especially on my part. And I'll be completely transparent. I came from the private sector, right? So that's a lot different. I think the confusion is we feel like we kind of have a performance-based program, but yet for merit increases, and then that's been approved, if you will, but then now it's kind of like the last 2 years, we've been able to do the merit increases based on their performances. Any insight, please?
Let me
Senator
ask
McGinn.
Matthew a question first. Matthew, on fee funds, I never had fee funds. Do they, when we give all state agencies an increase in salary, does it automatically go to the fee funded agencies as well?
I believe so, Madam Chair. We kind of collect what that calculation would be. I do know, such as I think in 2019, when the legislature added the 2.5% increase, there were a few hiccups with the biennial agencies, including the bank commissioner, where in the next year, so last year, we had to go back and add an additional fund because that increase was only included in the 2020 budget. So we had to add a supplemental for 2021 to continue that increase. So we kind of keep track of what those increases would be and calculate those towards the end. But sometimes, depending on how things work out, what year it is, there are sometimes a little bit of a hiccup in these biennial agencies where, because normally you would have a budget approved, the agency would come back the next year with a fresh budget. With these biennial agencies, because you're approving a third year, they technically will have an approved budget next budget cycle. So sometimes there'll be a little hiccup where they have to have an enhancement or a supplemental to continue that increase that would have been approved.
I get that their 3-year doesn't line up with that, but what I think I heard you say is, yes, they get the 2.5%, and you're a little messy like higher education. It's always a dicey deal there too.
May I add to that? And my understanding again, because I have lived through one or two of those, we have the option to accept the 2.5% versus, so if we've given the merit and let's say our budget doesn't allow for, we would have to see if we have enough to compensate and go ahead and add the other 2.5%. Because with the merit program, if they hit their pay band, there's bands by their divisions, then they can't get a merit increase, but they do get legislative increases. So it does get kind of convoluted sometimes.
Like I said, you're kind of like higher ed. It's a little messy, and they have to make some of those same decisions. So, so anyway, and then as far as your performance base, we asked a lot of the small agencies to do that, and they did do that. But I got to tell you, quite frankly, the small agencies, I see it. I still haven't seen it at the larger agencies yet. So that started under the Brownback time, and I just don't know. I'd have to check with some of those agencies, find out if they're even trying anymore.
Okay.
I know the water and ag and some of those did that, and then I'm not quite sure if they're still doing it. So great. I'm glad you reminded me of that. I think I'll start asking that question of some of them, but
Okay.
if there's not any other questions, I'd make a motion or a recommendation.
Go ahead with your recommendation, Senator
Unless there's
McGinn.
other people want to talk.
I don't see anyone, so you go ahead.
My recommendation would be to give them up to the $100, along with that the bank commissioner has to go get a bill drafted and submitted this year so that those notes, so that's so noted in the report to the Ways and Means Committee, and then I want a status update at Omnibus about where the bill is, where we're at.
Do I have a second on that motion? Senator Francisco seconds. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would you like to have discussion? I skipped that, didn't I, Senator Warren?
Right.
So I'm sorry. Go right
That's
ahead.
right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I understand the commitment of those serving on the board and thank them for that. And it's really the intent of the committee to suggest that it's a higher amount than state legislators. If that's the will of the committee, then it is, but I'm not sure I could support that amount. Thank you.
Well, just for purpose of discussion is our legislative pay amount, is that worth discussing?
I think our legislative pay amount is a joke. So I just thought the $100 would be easier for them as they're trying to recruit people to be on the board. They can just say, I got $100, and then they don't have to explain the story of why it's $88.60. So, and again, we're going to add that we want to report back at Omnibus and just see where everybody's at on this and the actual cost and, are you going to have to adjust your fees or not? Actually, is that in here? Do you have a trend of your fees over time? Because you said you had to adjust them all the time.
Yeah, well, we don't necessarily adjust them all the time. I can tell you the trend has been, there has not been an increase. They've actually decreased over the last 4 to 5 years. And part of that was due to, we received, because of a lawsuit with sweeping of funds, we received $500,000 back. And so we reduced fees the very next year to give that money back to the banks. And we've been able to hold those rates steady because it is based on asset size. And with the asset size continuing to grow, even though we're losing the number of banks, that has helped us not have to raise fees. Which also helps in, making sure we have the staffing for more complex exams, which is what we're finding with these mergers and acquisitions.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that further explanation and clarification about the intent, I'm more comfortable with that. So thank you for that, Madam Vice Chair.
Yes, and I'm sorry I skipped that process. So we have one more budget to do, so I'm conscious of the time for us too. But so thank you for that too. And so are we ready to vote? Do we have any more discussion? All right. All those in favor of Senator McGinn's motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. And Matthew, you'll write that up in the notes for Senator McGinn and Senator Erickson to carry to the full committee?
I will.
Okay, you have all that. All right. Any other discussion on this budget? All right. Would I have a motion to pass out the governor's recommendation as amended by this committee of the State Bank Commissioner? Senator Warren makes a motion, second by Senator Erickson. Discussion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. All right, motion passes. So committee, we're just a tad bit behind schedule. If anyone needs to leave, we're not bumping up to another committee, but we do have one more. And this is Department of Credit Unions, and Matthew Moore is our researcher budgeter. So we also have joining as virtual Vicki Hurt, Administrator, Kansas Department of Credit Unions, and Shelley Reiblin, Administrative Office, Kansas Department of Credit Unions, with this on WebEx also. So Matthew, you take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You should have before you the budget analysis for the Department of Credit Unions. The first page would be 1637. In a very similar agency to the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, only this time rather than investigating and examining banks, they're credit unions. Same information with general overview, some key points from the previous years. 1614 includes some performance measures. And then the budget trend on 1642, and then the operating table on 43 and 44. But I'll begin in earnest on page 1645 with budget year 2021. The agency requested a revised estimate of $1.3 million. This is a decrease of about 18,000. Again, very similar to the bank commissioner, the decreases are primarily related to those sort of COVID travel decreases rather than doing these sorts of investigations and examinations in person. We're now doing them more virtually. So there's a decrease in those sort of travel expenditures. If you turn to page 46, you can see that the governor did concur with the agency's request. On 1647, you'll see budget year 22 begins. The agency requested 1.3 million. This was an increase of about $55,000. That's primarily due to the agency requesting an salary increase of about 4 to 5% for employees. The governor did remove that. You can see that on page 1648. Her recommendation is the same as the agency's request, only she removed that about $46,000 for salary increases. Other than that, very similar level of spending as 2021. You'll see on 1649 the information for FY23. Again, $1.3 million. The only real difference is there's some shifts just in the kind of group health insurance, some decreases in contractual services, but very similar level of spending. They did request another salary increase for 23. However, if you look on 1650, the governor overall concurred but removed that salary increase from their budget. On page 1652, you'll see the fee fund analysis or the narrative on on page 52. The credit unions is a little bit different from the bank commissioner, so you don't see the tables with the fees. For the credit unions, it's a 0.02% flat fee on all assets and for the credit union. So there's not a tiered approach that the bank commissioner has. It's just a for all credit unions, 0.02% of their assets. You'll see on 1653 just the fee fund analysis table, again, kind of a downward trend. But overall, the agency tries to maintain about 3 months worth of expenditures in that ending balance. So going into the next year, they'll have that 3 months, which is kind of where they are on track to do that. And for that, I would stand for any questions.
Okay, and also joining us on WebEx, if the committee has questions for Vicki Hurt or Shelley Ribbelin, they're with us also. Do we have any questions? I guess I would have one, who maybe with the credit unions, are you okay with the governor's recommendation? You understand what she did with the salary piece, are willing to accept that in each year?
Yes, and I'll just say that we're kind of in the same position as the Banking Commission is, that we compete with other government agencies that do audits in our state with our credit unions and with the public. And so we struggle with those salaries also.
And then I'm sorry, I didn't tell the committee, that was Vicki Hurt speaking to us, answering that question. Are there any other questions, committee? Okay, Senator Francisco.
Thank you. This is a question for Senator McGinn. So I'm just assuming that even if the governor has not recommended salary increases in this budget, those will be addressed by the Ways and Means Committee globally.
Yes, and what I would do in the notes for Matthew is to make sure it's so noted that these agencies are also
For the salaries.
Madam Chair, I would have to, if Senator McGinn would repeat her comment, I didn't quite catch it. She cut out.
Matthew, I was just suggesting that you need to so note in our comments when we report back to the Ways and Means Committee that we want these salary and wages looked at omnibus as well.
So you got that, Matthew?
I do.
Okay, wonderful. All right, committee, are any other questions? Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry I don't know the answer to this question. Do we have a board like we do for the banks? Do we have a board of credit union folks that are meeting once a month and looking at things like that, or we don't in the state?
Vicki, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, we have a council that meets, but ours only meets quarterly, and they actually serve on a voluntary basis.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that response as well. So we're not looking at the same sort of issues that we were regarding the motion we made with the State Banking Commission and things like that. We're okay with where the credit union is?
That's correct, because they serve on a volunteer basis.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to for the Department of Credit Unions, recommend the governor's budget recommendations with the notes that Senator Carolyn asked Matthew to put in? Senator Warren makes the motion.
So moved.
And a second, Senator Francisco. Now, any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, we have ran over just a few extra minutes, committee, so we weren't bumped up to another committee. So Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Senator Faustido's absence, I believe we need to wish the chair a very, very happy birthday.
Well, thank you, everyone. I love my birthday. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, that is Senator Vasconcelos, what we remember her for. So thank you, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I add to that, but also want to let other members of the committee know that I have requested a draft bill from the reviser, Jason Long, and he is committed to do that. So I will make sure it gets introduced in Ways and Means.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and happy birthday. And I just want to say I appreciate all the presentations that were made on all of the budgets. I didn't personally comment on each one in the interest of time, but I do want to thank KLRD for all their work, and as well as the other conferees who came and testified either in person or in WebEx. It's critical to hear from you all, and I certainly appreciate it. So thank you to all of you. You do provide a important service in discussing the budget, and to the agencies and the departments. Thank you for the work that you do on behalf of Kansans as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And I have to say, this committee had 19, and we did them in our 4 days with enough time for our members to report out to us, or for us on our behalf to the full committee. So I think we did good work. It was rushed at times, but when we keep a timer to make sure we be as fair as we can with everyone. And I don't know about you, but I learned an awful lot through this too, with the different agencies on what they do, and keeping in mind this is their fees that they were spending with our caveats if we add. So I've learned an awful lot through this process, so I've appreciated it. Yeah, Senator McGinn.
I just want to know, Senator Thompson, are you getting ready to take off there on that plane?
Yeah, they're waiting on me, Senator McGinn. I got lunch somewhere. I don't know where.
Go south.
Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing before the committee, we won't be meeting Monday, of course, what our weatherman told us also. So Wednesday, and we have one bill to work, which would be fairly simple, and that's all that would be on the agenda. So it would be a lighter day on Wednesday, and we have some bills assigned to us, so we'll be analyzing those to see what we'll do the next week. So meeting adjourned.